DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
From First Paw Media, sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company, this is the Dog Driver Show. Visit our website at dogworksradio.com. Now here are your hosts, Robert Forto and Parto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto and you're listening to the Dog Driver Show. And joining me today is Parto. How's it going?
I'm doing excellent today. Another beautiful day in Wasilla, Alaska, and ready to talk to someone very, very special today.
Today we're talking to Dawn Brown. She's a veterinarian up here in Alaska. She lives in Salcha. Dawn, how's it going?
Very well. It's cooling off and we'll be training soon.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today on the show. Could you do us a favor and introduce yourself? Tell our listeners who you are and what you're all about, please.
Oh, okay. Well, on the dog driving side of it, I started as a junior in 1982 in New Jersey, of all places. I had a pet Siberian that used to pull me down the street on my skateboard as a kid. And at that time, there was a pretty extensive, we called it gig racing then, circuit in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. And somebody gave me an old leader, and somebody gave me an old wheel dog, and I was hooked and still am. So there was a group of people there with racing-strained Siberians, Pat Quinn and the Linda Booms, and Mark Henson and Harold Walsh, and I started with racing-strained Siberians for 8 years, helping people with those teams. And then when I went to vet school, that was my first exposure to Alaskans, and then shortly thereafter the pointer crosses. And when I got out of vet school, finally had my own team, so I'd basically been a handler for 12 years before I ever got a sled dog. And started in the 6-dog class in the Northeast, started traveling to the Midwest, then to Alaska, Canada, Colorado, racing limited classes pretty much all across the U.S. and Canada. On the vet side of it, I practiced for 17 years in upstate New York at a large mixed animal practice, which was good because it gave me some freedom to travel, which, weather being what it was necessary. And I finally got the wherewithal to get to Alaska in 2012, so I didn't have to put so much windshield time in. And up here, still running limited class races.
So, Dawn, before I turn it over to KP, I have one question for you in regard to the vet and mushing side. What perspective does it give you on either side, being either the vet or the musher, in your work with dogs?
Oh, boy. It flows both ways. I think, honestly, your veterinary training and your daily practice, quite frankly, I'm going to say, has a smaller impact than most people would think on what makes a good dog team as I'm trying to produce it. What makes good dog drivers and good dogs is driving dogs. I am certainly more attuned to illness and injury from it, but we don't get a lot of training in conditioning dogs, behavioral responses, or athletic conditioning. So there's not as much play there as you would think. In the reverse way, I really appreciate, working dogs and what they have to deal with, so I'm a little more sensitive to some of the more subtle types of things that I've got to consider when I see an actual working patient. That would be the quickest summary I guess I could give without being on the phone for a week.
Yeah, Dawn, we know each other for many, many, many years in the Midwest in the 90s, and we raced together in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, and all the way till today. And I have a humongous respect for you, your training, your dog team, and your knowledge and expertise. Do you think being a vet gives you an edge in the field compared to people who are like me or anyone else who do not have the medical veterinarian background?
Yeah, no, like I kind of alluded to it. In terms of teaching the dogs and conditioning, it doesn't really teach you that much. What it does make me very sensitive to is if an animal's behavior or just daily life in the kennel or their performance is a little off, I'm pretty sensitive to looking for illness or injury first rather than just shrugging it off as an anomaly or behavior problem. So that helps. I mean, I'm pretty forgiving if an animal is showing signs of trouble, because I'm also humble enough to know that just because I may not always find the source of it doesn't mean it isn't there.
Yeah, I noticed, when we are racing, of course, a lot of drivers, they bring dogs to you to look at them for any type of soreness or injuries or any type of anomalies that they see. Is it distracting when you're racing and people are coming with dogs with their pads or shoulders or necks or hips?
Sometimes. I mean, most people are pretty respectful in the sense that they'll wait until I'm not, when I'm at a race as a racer, not as a vet. They'll wait until I'm finished and then come over with questions and so on. Very rare that I get anybody that I have had people literally run over to me as I'm hooking up a dog team, asking me about how to treat something, but that doesn't happen all that often.
Yeah. Let's talk about dogs and training. What type of training do you schedule for your dog team, and do you try to peak during the season? Do you have several peaks for your dog team, or what do you do?
Well, I've always thought about trying to get several peaks out of them, but I don't think I've ever successfully managed it. I'm usually aiming nowadays to peak in March for the championship season in March, late February, middle March is what I'm aiming at, because the races that are my priorities, would be Limited North American Championship first and foremost. The North Pole race has blossomed into an excellent event, so I want to be on point for that one as well. Sometimes I train so conservatively that sometimes in the earlier part of the year I'm still playing with lineups and not quite on speed. So you do a far better job than I do of having the team fit and ready to go in those like Eagle River Classic and those championship races at Montana Creek. I'm often behind the 8 ball on those events. You certainly have kicked my butt enough times for me to know it.
Dawn, can you, for our listeners who are not familiar with extremely competitive racing, can you explain what peaking is in a dog team?
Okay, this is where, to me, this is a fairly narrow period of time where they are physically fit, they are mentally trained, they know what to expect at a race in terms of commotion and passing and crowds and so on. And if you are a very lucky person, it all falls together on the same weekend, and you have one of those rides of a lifetime that it's like crack. It keeps you going in the sport when the whole unit is just functioning beautifully. You've managed to avoid the illness and the injury, and they're just all on the same day. And you can, as soon as you step on the runners and pull the hook, you're going to know that it's that day. So that's what you're trying to get. They're lean, they are fit, they're healthy, and they can only, I really am a believer, though, that any given organism, whether it's a human runner or a dog, you have several peak performances in any given season, and I think to some extent a finite number of those high performances in one's lifetime. And you have to, I think it does behoove us to kind of aim those as carefully as we can when we're training and conditioning the dogs.
Definitely. Dawn, you live in East Salcha, not Salcha. Tell us a little bit.
I lived in upstate New York after I graduated from vet school, I was in upstate New York for about 17 years.
Yeah. Living in Salcha with the weather and the conditions that you have, tell us a little bit about the challenges and things that you have to do in order to maintain a healthy, competitive sprint dog team.
Yeah, it's vastly different from the challenges I had in the Northeast. So here, honestly, you're blessed with so many things. We don't tend to lose our trails to warm weather and rain. We deal with the opposite. We have to deal with some cold snaps, and there haven't been. I got here in 2012. The winter of 2013 was pretty brutal. I think we had at least 3 10-day stretches where it was well below 30 below. Training. The only way you could get to train was if you could get up on an inversion and up on a hillside. But I have a heated dog barn because I have fairly short-coated sprint dogs, and you must have good husbandry in terms of keeping these dogs protected from cold injuries to both their bodies and their minds. My cutoff for going out at all for my own animals is about 15 below, and even then I'm going to have them all jacketed and go a fairly short distance at a fairly slow speed. Fortunately, the weather being what it is, we can often get away from that if you can truck the dogs up to one of the trails that run along the ridgelines up here. It is routine for it to be 30 or 40 degrees warmer up there, so you can usually still get them out. It just takes a little more work, but the cold is probably the biggest challenge. Our fall training here, we're running a lot on gravel roads, so I have to work harder keeping their feet together in the fall. But honestly, compared to what I had to juggle living in the Northeast, it's comparatively easy here. It's still a challenge, but there's a lot of things that I had absolutely no control over in the Northeast that could literally just absolutely have me parked for 10 days on a frequent basis.
So when is, we talked about 15 below, 20 below temperatures that you have. You talked about coating dogs, booting dogs. Explain why it's important for the type of dogs that you, myself, and lots of people are running in the circuit to have this additional care and this additional coverage, basically.
Yeah, so it's even at the slowest speeds we train in sprinting, which by the time it gets cold, maybe 14, 15 miles an hour, you are going to start freezing extremities on ears, the prepuce, places like that. If the females have had pups, any nipple exposure can freeze really easily, and if you're not paying attention, you could miss it, but it is certainly going to affect the dog. Their minds, too. So I've seen just a few, because I'm pretty careful about it. I have seen a few cold, sour dogs in my life, and once they make up their mind that they're done with the cold, they're done. And it seems that their barometer for what's too cold seems to escalate a little every year to the point where, once it's, plus 20, they just don't want to go out there because they don't like the cold anymore. I haven't had that because I'm super careful with it now. But people do need to pay attention to that, and if the performance is off, I'm pretty sure thinking way back when I had a dog in the Northeast that I just wasn't as sensitive to it because we're usually fighting warmth instead of cold. And I think the reason I had that one dog really decide to retire by the time he was about 5 or 6, I think that I just missed that because I had no index suspicion for it. But, you take these dogs out in below zero weather, you had better take some extra care to protect them, because if you don't check their undersides or their ears right when you finish for frostbite, it thaws rather rapidly, and you're not going to know it's there. If you take a look underneath a day later, you'll see the inflammation, but you can't be missing those things. You have to pay attention.
So earlier you learned about First Paw Coffee Company, and now I'm going to tell you about its Tail Wagger Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Tail Wagger Blend is their first offering, and its name and label were crowdsourced from their Facebook fans. How cool is that? The Tail Wagger Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It is a medium roast from Colombian beans with tastes of Brazil nuts, grapefruit, and oak. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.
Living in this, in the colder temperature, of course, you have to check their metabolism also. Do you adjust your dog food? Do you feed different when the temperatures they are in the extreme cases? And tell us what you feed and what your program is.
Okay, I do adjust, but remember having that dog barn, and I've got it heated to about 30 above. I am not going to have to push as much fat into them as I would if I had them outside in that type of cold. So I probably feed more commercial food than most people. On a volume basis, it's probably 50-50 animate to meat. And then I add, I have no magic formula, but what I add is animate impact, some fish oil, bone meal to make sure my calcium phosphorus is okay, some psyllium, and then some kind of probiotic is usually going into the food as well. And right now, during the summer, they're getting very little meat. They're mostly on commercial diet, animate. In fact, it's even the lower octane animates because some of them start getting heavy because they're just playing in the kennel. But it definitely slides to increasing percentage of fat when they're at the peak of the season, and then it starts winding back down in the spring. The problem if you feed them the same diet all year long is these little bitty females that don't do very much in the summer. They sit on their house and watch the butterflies and not chase them. They will get really fat, and you will start cutting the volume back to the point where you're probably hitting your energy needs properly, but you're depriving them on vitamins and minerals. So you're better off just going to a high-quality, sort of lower protein, lower fat food for those dogs than you are feeding microscopic amounts of a rich food that you'd be giving all winter long.
Yeah, definitely the butterflies in the summertime for some of our listeners.
I have, you know this as well as I do. I have some dogs that eat just as much in June as they do in December because of the whole butterfly hunting thing.
Yeah, I completely understand. For our listeners who are not familiar, Dawn and myself and my kennel partners, Cheezix, we have pretty much the same type of dogs, and I call them the butterfly chasers. During the summertime, they go crazy when they see one butterfly flying at 2 miles away, and my dogs personally, actually, they're probably thinner during the summertime than in the wintertime because they're all chasing butterflies and going crazy.
The noise sounds like there's a dog loose in the kennel. You go running outside to see what's wrong, and they are just frantically trying to catch a butterfly.
That's the summer training we give them, right?
Yeah.
That's about it. Also, Dawn, you are a key important member of ADMA, the Alaskan Dog Musher Association in Fairbanks, Alaska. Tell us about your club and what the future this club looks like.
So we are pretty excited this year. This is the 75th running of our Open North American Championship, the longest continually run sled dog race ever. And as far as how many years in a row it's been successfully run. So we've got, at the moment, we've been blessed to entertain a group of board members who have been very, very good about working together and increasing the purses over the last 6 or 7 years, trying to get the trail in tip-top shape so it is the championship that it should be. In my mind, in limited class racing, the ultimate test is that limited North American. The 3 days on, really hard, fast trails, with that third day being a touch longer, it's a tough, tough test. For the Open, it's the 75th anniversary, so we're working hard to make that a little bit bigger and better event this year. It's a great test. We really appreciate it when people drive all the way up here from Canada in the Northeast. We had folks here last year in the limited classes from Maine. Eddie Clifford and Nova Clifford were here racing, and we had some drivers from Quebec come and join us. And we really want to see that type of large area participation again. Really excited about that.
Dawn, you mentioned about the fast trails. Years ago, we used to fly our dogs from the lower 48 and come and race the limited North American championship in Fairbanks at the Jeff Studer track. And I recall the very, very first time I was running on those trails, I was telling myself, oh my God, how can a trail be faster than this? And for a lot of people who are not familiar with Fairbanks trails, they do not understand the complexity of a pure speed race. And I always say, speed kills because these trails are so extremely fast that it is very easy to make a mistake and injure a dog or lose your sled or tangle or do anything else. Tell us about what your experience is on those trails and how you define those Fairbanks trails.
Oh, for the Jeff Studer Trail in particular, Rob Downey had warned me before I ever came up here. He says, you got to go, you've got to see it, but it's going to ruin you for everything else. And in a sense it has, because I've pretty much parked myself here to be close to it. Yeah, it's a hard, fast trail. It is wide enough to pass. The beginning of the trail, you are actually, no matter how far you're going on that trail, you are slightly going downhill the whole way out and then coming uphill the whole way home, with the steepest part of the climb being the first, or basically steepest part of the hill outbound first mile, and then the more steep climb coming home is also the last mile. I got warned repeatedly about, after driving, 4.5 days with these dogs, about taking them to the track and just letting them rip down that hill. And that is super important as far as preventing injury, whether you're training or racing on it. I see a lot of dog teams get beaten, honestly, because they go out too fast. And it's very, very easy to do. You can be looking at your dog team and thinking that you've got them pinned where you want, and you look down and they're going 2.5 miles an hour faster than that. So we don't have a lot. In terms of moose, they're out there. It's not as bad as I would say in the South Central trails. I think the moose issues are a little more scary down there. But we do have other trail users out there. We have fat bikers and skiers and walkers and people pulling little kids in sleds, and unfortunately sometimes there's snow machine activity out there that's not supposed to be there. So you have to be on your toes for those sorts of things. But it is a hard speed test, and you have to have the dogs geared up and fit for that, or they're going to get winded very, very quickly, and your results are probably going to be disappointing.
Yeah, definitely. And those trails, as you mentioned, inbound, probably the last couple of miles, you're going up the hill, and the last leg of the race is a tough challenge to make it up to the clubhouse, the historical clubhouse, the log cabin that you have with pictures of legends, like
the Mushers Hall itself is a pretty neat treat for that. It's a very cool building, big viewing windows so you can watch the teams going in, down, and out. But yeah, there's photographs going back decades inside that of mushers, and it's a little bit of history there too. Yes,
definitely. For this season, what are you planning to do? How many races, and what are the classes, Dawn?
Yeah, I will. I do seem to be a bit stuck in a rut. We'll be aiming at the 8 and 10 dog classes again, with some younger dogs and some older dogs, probably running the 6 dog team as sort of the A team, and the 8 and the 10, and the B team and the 6. I've got a lot of dogs retired in the kennel right now, so the core to make the main team is really quite narrow. Probably 12 dogs, including the yearlings, to make an 8 to 10 dog team. And then I've got one litter. I've raised a litter of pups this year. I hadn't done that in a little while. So those are beautiful little pups. They'll be 17 weeks old on Wednesday. So that's pretty much the core of the kennel. We're about ready to start training. The weather has been a bit wobbly for any kind of consistency here. We've had some mornings in the 20s, and then we've had mornings in the 50s. So my training schedule is completely governed by my work schedule. So I have to go out on the days that I'm off, or else train in the dark, which I really don't like. And we've had, it's not consistent enough to get out. Most of what I'm doing right now is just letting the dogs loose. I have a pretty large fenced-in kennel, just letting them run and play and crash and bang. And that's pretty much what we're doing right now.
Dawn, we are getting in the last few minutes of our interview. Do you have any sponsors, anyone that you want to thank in this sport? We all are working with support from the outside world, financially, time-wise, husbands, partners, friends who are assisting us, because as you know, as all of us, we know in order to be competitive, you cannot depend just on yourself. It is a team effort.
Oh, yeah. No, you are not an island. So a huge thank you has to go out to Rob and Mary Giordani of Animate Pet Foods, who have given me a lot of support all the way. They also sponsor our limited North American Championship, huge supporters of the ADMA and sled dog racing in general. Also want to thank Cheez-Ix for being just good friends and supporters. They come up here and train with me the last few winters and use the trails. Pretty much, there's only one dog I think I'm training this year that is not out of their breeding line. But they've been hugely supportful as well. Mike McCowan also helps me with puppies. In fact, he left this morning. He does a good job socializing them because he's driving heavy equipment and dropping trees and doing a lot of loud things that my pups just don't get to see. So that's really good for them to get a little look at a different environment while they're growing up. There we are.
Dawn, we always end the show asking our guests the same question, and that is, if somebody were to come to you that's just getting involved in the sport and you could offer them one piece of advice, what would you tell that person?
Ooh, boy, there's so many things that are important. What makes somebody successful in this sport is detail management. And that means all the details. Like, you can't be on top of your equipment and have the fanciest sled and the fanciest wax and the fanciest runners and the fanciest lines, but not pay attention to diet and genetics and training. And most importantly of all, just your day-to-day interactions with those dogs. That's what allows you to not miss those details. As you're out in that kennel every day with those dogs, you know them like you know your kids. And if one of them's a half a bubble off, you need to be able to pick that up. It's detail management.
That's great advice. You always hear of the kennels out there where the handlers do all the work and the musher just jumps on the sled at the start line, and typically those folks aren't very successful, are they?
No, I don't see that. You have to put the time in. You have to know those dogs, and they have to know you. It is a relationship. I'm always stunned that any dog at all will run for somebody else. I've seen it happen, but I know if I were to hand the best dogs I've driven off to somebody, they're not going to get the same response from those dogs that I can.
Excellent. KP, anything in closing?
No, just wanted to thank you, Dawn, for spending the last 30 minutes with us and chatting with us, sharing some of your experience, your knowledge with us. I wish you good luck with your training season, and I'm sure we will see each other on the trail, and looking forward to having you at our race at the Eagle River Classic.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's on the radar this year for sure. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. On behalf of our guest today, Dawn Brown, this is Robert Forto and KP for the Dog Driver Show. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From First Paw Media, this is the Dog Driver Show. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you can see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert Forto and Kurosh Parto. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media.